Okay, now we're ready to apply the decals to the aircraft, and here are the basic things that you're going to need. So first of all, a knife or a pair of scissors to cut the decals from the sheet that you're wanting to use. A bowl of water. In this case, I've got just slightly warm water straight out of the tap. Also a brush for helping you to apply the decals to the right place. In addition to this, you're going to need some maybe a cotton bud to help draw the water out from behind the decal, and some kitchen towel just to help you apply the decal as well. So those are the very basic things that you're going to need. There are a number of products on the market that will help apply your decals. Okay, they all pretty much really do the same job. Some are slightly better than others. One that I use, this is the Micro Sole, but Micro Set and Sole are used to help set the decals in place, making them a little bit stronger, but also softening the decal a little bit so they conform to the panel lines on your model. Again, Mr. Mark's setter and softener do exactly the same job as Micro Set and Sole. I find these work on decals that maybe the Micro Set and Sole don't often work so well on. Or you could just you get just a basic decal fix which will help. There's lots of different things out there, but my preferred decal solutions are either Micro Set and Sole or Mr. Mark setter and softener. Okay, so what you would do, sometimes you might just add a little bit of this to the water itself, okay, and then use this while you're applying the decals, and then after the decals been applied, you put this over the top to help it to flatten out and to conform, like to give what they call a painted on look. Okay, so that's some of the things that we can use. So here's our lighting, and we're ready to go. So I've cut the decal call outs out so that I can see them. Okay, and I tend to go with applying some of the larger ones first. So I'm just going to get on with the decaling. I'll talk it through a little bit with you. Maybe I'll just apply these decals on the lower wing and talk them through, and then we'll just rush through until it's finished. So the first thing we do is we cut the decals out that we want. So it's calling out for the roundels, number 7, so we're going to take those two out. And these large numbers, number 9, we'll just take this out as well. Okay, so once we've cut our decals out, just move the aircraft out of the way. Once we've cut our decals out, we just pop these into the water. Now you can either put them in with a set of tweezers, or you can just pop them in, and we're just going to leave them in there to soak. I have no set amount of time really. I think the main indicator for me is once the paper is completely soaked through, I tend to then pull it out. So we're just going to leave them in there just for a minute or two. The instructions don't really talk about how long you should keep it in there, but we're just going to, I can see that the water's soaked right through the backing. Okay, so we're just going to pop these out, lay them on the flat surface, move our water out of the way. Okay, and then we're going to come in, and I'm just going to use my flat brush to just check when this starts to move. Okay, and when it starts to move freely, we know we're ready to apply the decal. Okay, it's starting to lift up now a little bit, but it's still not quite moving. So, right. So it's important that we look to see exactly where we'll try to line up our decals to exactly where they need to be. So we're looking here, we're looking at the roundel coming into this section here. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water to where I'm applying just to clean it off. Okay, and as you can see now, this is really moving freely. And so what we'll do, let's move those along. What we'll do now, there's several ways of doing it. Sometimes I lift the decal up with the brush, or I take it to the edge of a surface and then I just take it to the edge and then pull it off like so, so I get my brush underneath. Or you can just put it in position and then slide using your finger, just hold the decal in place and then just slide it out. And so there we have our first decal. So we're just going to make sure we get that in the right place, and we know that we want to come closer to here. Okay, and so I'm quite happy with that. Now what I do now is I take my cotton bud, slightly dampen it, and then all I do is just roll it across the surface of the decal so that it flattens it down. Okay, and that just gets rid of any excess water from underneath and maybe hopefully any air bubbles, and helps it just to conform that a little bit better. And so that's now nice and in place, and let's get on with the next. So that's the basics of how to put your decals on. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to decal the rest of the model. Any issues that I come across, I'll bring it back up. So let's get on. Okay, something that I forgot to mention is normally when I'm applying decals to my models, what I ensure I do, I know not everybody does this, but I tend to put a clear coat over the top, a gloss coat, just to help them to sit down nicer. Now this is quite a matte finish, but it's still going down quite nicely. So we're just applying these just straight over the paint. Okay, so here we have something underneath this decal, so we're just going to lift it up and see if we can just get that out. So it's important you try not to get any dust under it. So let's get our brush, just fold it over itself, just have a look to see what that is. Okay, so it's just an impurity in the paintwork that's causing it to just show up. So I'm just going to get my knife, just peel that away a little bit. Okay, and that's dealt with that. And just lay it back down, and that's got rid of that little bump. You want to try to do this in a dust-free environment. You don't want to get little bits of dust underneath your decals if you possibly can. Okay, so now we've put the main decals on, and now we're going to come in and add all the tiny little stencils that you find on here. Okay, so we're making good progress, and let's just carry on. Okay, it's suggesting that you put a decal on this little lump here. I'm just going to use some red paint to paint that section, because I don't think the decals are going to conform that easily to that shape without using some of the products that we spoke about earlier. Okay, we're coming to the last of the decals, to the black lines on top of the wings, the no walk lines. Just an interesting thing really, or just something I'm reminded of. As a boy, what I used to do, these little labels, so the Lightning F2A, I used to, in our kitchen above the sink where there were some tiles, every time I used to build a model I used to put the name of that above the sink. And in the end, above our sink in the kitchen, there was loads and loads and loads of these models that I'd built, and all their names above the sink. I wish I'd had a photograph of it. I've moved out of that house long time ago, and I often think about all of the models that I built and all the names that I used to put above that sink. These really long decals are always really difficult to get lined up, because it's supposed to go along this panel line along the leading edge here, but it's really hard to get it lined up. So I just use the flat of my brush to just push it into place before I push it down with the cotton bud. But it's just important you just take your time, and if it starts drying out, just put a little bit of water on it just to help, just to keep it from sticking down. past I would have called that finished and said and been happy with that. We're just going to do a few more things before we finish it off. I'm going to apply some of the decal solution just to help these decals conform to the surface. So I'm going to use the Mr. Mark softener, and all we do here is we just apply that. I'm just going to use the brush I was using. We apply that to the decal, and what happens is that just softens the decal up, and as it dries it will conform better to the surface of the aircraft. So just help it to stick there a little bit better. So we're just going to leave that to dry overnight, and then we're going to come back tomorrow to see how we've got on. Okay.